Welcome to Oral Histories of the Gold Country. And I'm Monika Rose, your host. And I have two lovely ladies here that are historical in and of themselves. We have Patty Grant, aka Whittle, and Robin Ardahl, also Williams. And I'd like to kind of introduce you to their lives at Angels Camp and how everything originated. And you guys knew all the secret stories, and growing up, you knew all the gossip, but we're not going to give it all out today. But we're going to hear some interesting things about your life. So maybe we could start, and it's going to be a wonderful free-for-all. We don't know where this is going to go. So talk about maybe how you got here and how you grew up in this area in your family.
My parents came in the gold rush in the 1800s. Did yours come that early?
No, mine was still in Norway.
Mm-hmm. When did they come?
1949.
Oh, really?
100 years later.
A year before I was born. That's interesting.
We didn't belong to the town because growing up, we were the only Ardahls in town, of course. Had no clue as a child why we never got invited to reunions, because all of our friends went to family reunions in town. We never got to go to family reunions.
Because you
We
weren't
weren't
related to
related
us.
to anybody.
You should have come to the Whittle reunions. We hired the whole freaking Frogtown was full when we had Whittle reunion. It was like I met more people than I'd ever thought I was related to.
Well, I went to school with all you Whittles, but
Yeah.
we just thought you were normal people.
Oh, how wrong you can
So Whittles went back how long? How far back?
Well, 1849 is when great-great-grandpa came from Australia. Yeah, before that, he was from England. But Alexander Whittle came with his wife, and he was found with his throat slit. And they claim that he committed suicide. Now, I have a hard time with that one.
Unless you got a stiletto.
Yeah, but his wife had left him earlier, and three kids were left with some neighbor there, raised them. But yeah, there's some interesting history there that I'd like to get into.
You haven't yet.
No, I'm too lazy.
Too lazy.
Do you have it all in albums? Did
No.
somebody organized all this stuff?
Rex Whittle did. Yeah, Rex is an absolute historian about things, and so yeah.
We should pause now and go get Rex.
We should. Yeah.
We did have an interview.
Rex with Donnie, his father,
Don
yeah.
and his wife, and Nancy.
Right. But if you just let Rex go, he can tell you names of everybody and way back and wherever.
My memory of the Whittle family was we rode the short bus. Not that short bus, but the bus that had the least amount of kids because they had the farthest to go and there were not very many of us. So living on Finnegan Lane, Mr. Meacham drove the bus, bounced past my house and head down the hill. Meanwhile, we end up halfway out to Buzzy Whittle's house, which is all the way out there in the Finnegan on right at the base of Bear Mountain. Well, we'd get pretty much farther out there, and I would pop up from the back seat, and Mr. Meacham would look up at me, and then I'd say, I think I missed my stop. But the bus was short, and the roads were so bumpy that you'd sit back there, and you could just bounce all the way down and all the way back. And nobody cared in the 50s if you didn't make it home exactly at any particular time.
That's true.
And the school didn't care if you rode the bus out there.
Yeah.
So but that's the farthest distance.
That was
It dead ended out there.
Howard Stone was the one that did
Well, Howard came on later, yeah.
Howard. I got a kick out of Howard's daughter was my class, and she was funny too. But yeah, I don't remember riding the bus that much. When I got older, I walked from the ranch there at the end of town into the high school. I never did ride the bus when I was in high school.
Being in downtown Angels was tough. The old grammar school was 3 houses down from where I lived, which had they left the old grammar school there, I would have just got up and walked to school. They put it a mile away up in Altaville.
That's right.
So in those days, moms didn't have cars, dads did to get to work. So we kids either got up and got to the bus stop or you missed the bus. If you missed the bus, you had to walk the mile straight up.
It got straighter, further, and
Yeah.
steeper every day.
Yeah.
Miles. Just it took days. And then the worst part was if you dawdled at the house too long and you knew you were going to miss the bus, we would start calling anybody we could think of. Could you give us a ride to school? And just desperately dial the numbers on the phone. Please, could you? So when you couldn't, then we'd realize that we could no longer walk to school. We'd dawdled so long we were going to have to run to school. So you'd get there just.
No bicycles?
Well, bicycles were great because you'd have to push them all the way to school. I mean,
It's a steep area. It really
it's
is.
straight up. So when they joke about, straight up both ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming home with your bicycle though, because they had fat tires in those days. Oh, and the most amazing thing, we had blacktop. And the first it was just oil sprayed on gravel and stuff. Then they started putting blacktop out. Well, those big fat tires, it's like being magnetically stuck to the blacktop. And you could go around corners almost like a motorcycle driver, touching your elbows on the things. You're screaming all the way down the hill.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool. I never had a bike, so I don't did that. And that's fun.
Dad refurbished mine. Well, he refurbished the whole neighborhoods, I think. But we'd go down to the old school, and there was a tree down there that had a cut off limb that was just about the height for us kids to stand on because we were too little to throw our legs over the bike. So we would stand up on that. And then we'd get kids behind us, and once we got on it, then they'd give us a running start and shove us, and then we could ride in circles.
Did you ever do the 2 and 3 kids on one bike thing?
Her brother's a daredevil.
My brother. Yes, we rode handlebars.
Mm-hmm.
We stood up to ride.
Mhm.
We rode home from school with no hands, Mom. But those bikes were so stable.
Yeah.
I mean, it was,
It's a different thing than.
yeah. Now with the skinny tires, if you hit a little tiny rock, I mean, you're down.
When you said blacktop, I remembered walking to the swimming pool. And we always had those cheap flip flops that would break, and it would get stuck to the blacktop.
So what was the swimming hole? Was it down at the creek or?
Yeah, it was near the creek on the
The pool
perimeter
or
of
the
town.
hole?
The pool.
The pool.
Is what I'm talking about.
It's
Yeah.
pool. Is there still a pool
The
down?
pool? No, they buried it. I understand that pool used to be the chlorine pond from the mine that was on the hill right above it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
With
the-
the chlorine?
Yeah, that was used for mining.
Okay, so that it would be used from the mining and some of the residue with the chlorine? was it?
No, they had the creek coming into it. Actually,
Okay.
it was nice and clean because the creek
Was
came
it?
into it.
sure.
So no chemicals? You guys weren't irradiated by some kind of interesting chemical?
No, we
mercury?
were contaminated by the you name it, we've been contaminated.
The cool part about us in Murphy's and Angels Camp is that when the miners came in 1849, they had to have a source of water. Well, California is a dry state. So in the summer, everything dries up. They have no water. So they figured out that they'd have to go up to Lake Alpine. Well, Lake Alpine wasn't there, but they dammed an area and started making reservoirs in the high country so they could catch the water. Then they had to build flumes and ditch systems to bring it all the way down. Angels Camp has maintained that system since the 1849. When they did the rights to the water, they made a deal with Angels Camp and Murphy's that they would forever have water in their creeks. Otherwise, there'd be no creek.
Right. And that creek runs year round.
Year-round.
Angels Creek.
When my mother was little, they called that Bird Turn Creek because people would have their garbage, their sewage go into that creek.
Oh, great.
There was a lot of things that went. We kids started at our house. We knew the creek, and we started on the creek about 4. So we had our little hatchets and things, and we'd clear the way. So Daddy would help us dam up the dam right behind the house. We had a huge, big swimming pool right behind our house, which was just south of the footbridge there and Picking Angels. But we could go all the way down the creek, and we knew all the spots and pieces. But if you came to the cement dam, there was something about the cement dam that just told us that wasn't a healthy place to be.
Mm.
As the water went over it, it was this gold color, beautiful
Mm.
gold color. So we kids never swam below the cement dam. So it's years later, we're sitting around the house chuckling about all the things we kids are doing. And we said, well, we never went down to below the cement dam. And Daddy goes, well, it's probably a good thing. Why, Dad? Well, that's where the sewer used to overflow and come and go into the creek to head on down to Maloney's.
Oh, jeez.
So
That was after they had a sewage system. But before that, there was no, it was just.
Oh, he said, so that gold stuff was, and we're like going, no.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. Most gorgeous color.
But you know, the swimming pool that they maintained was really a fun place to go, and we always had a good time there.
It was incredible because Hippolyta Messina was in charge of it. And this man was part fish, part muscle man.
He had been in the Olympics. Did you know that?
I'm not surprised because this pool was huge and he could dive. Oh, he couldn't dive in the shallow end. He started the shallow end where we were playing. He would go underwater and he'd swim all the way to the far end of the diving board, turn around and come all the way back and never take a breath.
Yeah.
So
he had been in, I don't know what year the Olympics was, but I don't know if he won or not, but I was always impressed by that, you know.
he was a fish. He was amazing. And he was so good to us kids because the days that they cleaned the pool, they drained it. And the water from the creek would go through the powerhouse and then come through this big black pipe that came into the swimming pool. So we'd come in and go, oh, it's closed today? Oh, we walked so far. Couldn't we come in, please? He let us get in the pool while it's draining. So all the way down at 8 feet, we'd have like this much water. And we'd all swim like fish until, you know, just kept filling all day long. Sometimes fish would get sucked in through the pipe. So sometimes you'd be swimming along and the water was green.
Did you ever fish in there? They had the fishing.
Oh my goodness.
That was so much fun. They would have fishing contests in the pool itself once a year.
Opening day. Opening day, May 1st. They planted all the creeks and stuff up here because they were running full year round. They would fill the whole pool up before summer started, and then they would stock it with who knows how many fish.
Yeah.
But you'd get up at dark 30 and you'd get your place, and then you'd fish all day. And I think they let you catch the limit. I don't remember.
I thought it was all kids for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, it was all kids.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well, parents would be there helping you out. But
Kids
were
could fish too. I mean,
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that nobody counted the fish, to be honest with you.
And it just, poles and hooks and everything flying through the air. And
I don't know how many people got.
afterwards, of course, they had to clean it all. But the first few days or so afterwards, you could still smell fish. And like I say, sometimes they'd come through the pipe and, they
so
come
what,
swimming with you.
you're swimming with the
You're
fish.
swimming with the fish.
Up at Ross Reservoir, my great-grandparents owned Ross Reservoir. And so when they would have a fishing contest up there too, but of course, when it became Angels Camp Water and they had to fix everything, they made it so you couldn't fish there.
I know.
My dad used to throw he'd take a can of cat food and he'd break it open and he'd throw it over there. And then at night he'd go in and he knew right where his can was and he'd get the big fish.
Oh, that's smart.
We would run out of what they call them, red hots or something, the red bait.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd catch some fish. Well, being little kids, we would, this is gross, we'd pop the eyeballs out and use those to catch the fish with. Well, we found out later you can't use fish parts to fish with.
It's a
Yeah.
label.
That's kind
Yeah.
of realistic, yeah.
And we'd never heard of noodling. We had no clue what that was. So we were good kids.
I was surprised that your dad was a logger. I didn't know that before.
He logged in Washington State.
Oh.
He was also a fisherman up in Alaska. They lived on Hood Canal right out of Seattle, and I just found out it's the largest fjord in North America, the Hood Canal. And they're famous for oysters and some other kind of seafood things.
This was before you were born?
Yeah. So Dad's family came from Norway, and Grandma never did speak English. But Dad was the youngest of 7. And his middle brother he came to Hollywood and he became an animator for Disney. So we kids grew up, you know.
Where some of your art talent comes from, maybe runs in the family.
Dad could do anything. He was like a Renaissance man. I mean, he could fix plastic toys. Now, who can do that other than God? Because you can't put plastic toys back together.
My dad was a logger, so we lived up in the mountains during the summertime because he was logging. And my mom would camp out with and we had cousins. Buzzy's dad was one of his partners. And all of us kids would be camping all day long. We'd play in the creeks all day long, you know, in the summertime. And I learned to drive up there with the logging trucks coming at me. When I was 12, my dad says, okay, this is first, second, neutral, third, fourth, and this is reverse. And you just keep it in low gear so you don't go too fast. Logging trucks it's all, you know, dirt road, you know. And so I learned to drive with the logging trucks coming at me, and I did pretty good. Well, one day he said, now be sure and put it in gear when you put it on a hill. When we lived on a hill, I put it in gear.
What year?
Neutral gear. Well, of course, when I got out, it went back. It actually was held up from the highway 49, from the fence. The fence caught it, so it was hanging off of the highway. And my dad came in madder than hell, just screaming at me, I told you to always park it in gear. And I said, Dad, I did. He says, well, what'd you park it in? I said, neutral. First, second, neutral.
It's a gear.
It's a gear. You know, you don't teach kids that without explaining stuff, you know.
Did you have a hard time driving? Getting your foot off the clutch? And Dad would take me out to Frogtown. And of course, the thing for the test, we were all terrified because you had to start on a hill during the test. So we'd get out there. For some reason, I could do all kinds of fancy tricks and things, jumping off rocks, but getting my feet to coordinate was the most hardest thing I burned out the clutch twice.
Yeah.
That's true.
Or then I'd pop it and go,
I don't think kids know what clutches are anymore.
They don't.
They don't exist, do they? I mean, how
In,
many?
in fact, I had to take my test. We moved down to the Bay Area when I was 17, and I had to take my test again. I got my license at 14, but then 4 years later, I had to take my test again. So I go into DMV, and they want me to, you know, prove that I could drive. And I said, I've been driving for 4 years. Well, I'm sorry, you have to have a certificate, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go back to the high school and get a certificate. And I'm sitting in the you know, car, and it's an automatic, and I've never driven an automatic before.
Was it a push button or that?
No, I've driven
Valiant.
those two. Yeah, I've driven those two.
Valiant push button. I remember that.
But then I finally got the certificate. I went to get my license, and I was not quite 18 yet. It was a month earlier than I was 18. It was December of 1967. And they wouldn't give me my license. I mean, they wouldn't take my, you know, information because I wasn't 18 yet. I had to have my mother's permission, written permission for me to take the test.
Oh,
And that made me even madder.
in the Bay Area?
In the Bay Area.
We got ours at 16, and I got it that day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I
Good
had
way.
I got it at 14, and it, you know, because we lived on a farm, you have to drive.
We had to drive through San Andreas to take our test, and the old courthouse used to be right there at the flashing light intersection.
right.
And the steps kind of came down on what's the dance hall now. I don't know what it is. So I come around, I went too wide, and I went boom, 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 drove up on the steps. And oops. I think I passed with a 71, 70.
Where was the courthouse exactly? Because I know where Signal Service was, that was the police station and the city hall.
Our house was right, basically across the street from
Across the
Russell.
street from almost.
Yeah. The only reason I know is my parents got divorced, and I had to go to their
But that's in
hearing.
San Andreas, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, but not in Angels Camp. There was no courthouse in
No,
Angels
no,
Camp at that time.
We had City Hall, which is right at the corner of Finnegan and Highway 4.
Yeah, courthouse, yeah, in San Andreas.
We used to play underneath the courthouse.
Mm-hmm. It's haunted down there.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's haunted down there.
The only
What
place
do
that I
you
know is
know?
hard is the old jail on Birds Way.
We never really got out on Birds Way
No?
for some reason. Later
So-
life, I babysat things out there.
So what's on Bird's Way? What's in?
It was Chinatown.
Chinatown, there was an old jail there that
Mhm,
was kind of spooky, and
mhm.
we all sneaked around and looked in it.
Wasn't there still a couple of houses where
Oh, yeah.
Chinese lived? And didn't they preserve that, or
I don't
or is
think
it?
so.
all
I think it's private now,
Private, yeah,
but
but people bought it.
it was the red light district too.
And you live near Hardscrabble,
I live on
right near it.
yeah, near it.
So
I
you
live
can't-
above the park,
So
basically.
people used to go up and down that, didn't you?
Chicken Letter?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Matter, yeah.
Before it was paved.
And I've driven up it, have you?
Yeah.
You've driven with what, a car?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Mom had a little old lady that she took care of and did her hair like once a week or something. And she was driving a big old red and white Ford Galaxy Fairlane 500, which my husband says there's no such thing. And I looked it up and it was a Ford Fairlane Galaxy 500. So,
You proved it right.
It's a,
I did.
it's a tank, though.
oh
Tank
my
of a car.
goodness, it was a
Oh, yeah.
tugboat.
Mhm.
So we,
more.
yeah, we'd come up back street, and then we'd have to turn really tight, and then you'd start down. And back then it was just two grooves in the road. There wasn't even any pavement. So you'd have to get that big old car up on one of the tops of them and not in the holes. And then we'd have to stop, we have to climb out. She'd have to go in and do her stuff.
And it's
And
near,
Fairview is where your brother got in that accident, isn't it?
No, that was on Finnegan, and that was horrible. A Volkswagen came around the corner, got from Finnegan, turned the tight corner, went up on Bush Street, and somehow flopped back down into the road or into the yard right there on that little triangle, and in front of two propane tanks, and they exploded. And
right in town.
Right down.
yeah, so he was at home in bed, and he heard the sound because it was right out our window. But you could touch it. So he jumped up and ran out and tried to pull him out. He had a big old yellow lab with him, and the first tank blew him backwards all the way down. There was 3 levels. It was Bush Street, then this yard, and then Finnegan. So it blew him down onto Finnegan, and the dog too. He jumped back up again and tried to get him the second tank blew. And there was no way to save him, but he got 3rd-degree burns all over. And he had dark brown hair back then, and when it came straight, I mean, just straight as a board. When it grew back in, he had blonde ringlets. Most amazing thing, it's like
He was our hero. He was pretty impressive. I mean,
there's the glory hole out at Carson Hill.
Mhm.
Steve, I think, was 12. And there was a family that would come up from Sacramento, and they were rebuilding that house right on the corner of 49 and 4, right across the street from Carly's Garage. So they also like to go out into the woods and do things. So they decided that they were going to take his 13-year-old son and my 12-year-old brother, and they were going to go check out the glory hole. And this is before it had been mined away. So it's just rough, as you climb through this brush, you get up to the glory hole. So they decide that the boys are going to drop down into the hole. Well, insane to begin with. They get down there and they hit a landing. Well, then the dad realizes that there is nothing between them. The glory hole goes all the way to Maloney's. I mean,
And it's filled with water or no?
well, I'm sure it is now, yeah.
Yeah.
Back then, there was no Maloney's.
there's a lot of rock.
Right. No, Maloney, just the river down below.
Yeah. So the dad says, "Stop, don't move anymore." He jumps in the car, drives back to town, and gets the fire department to come out and rescue them.
Are they on ledges or where?
They're down the hole,
Yeah.
and they just landed on a little ledge, and then it goes farther down.
Is it like a shaft?
Yeah, it's a shaft.
Okay.
You can't, it's
Yeah.
not a good angle. So he says, don't move, I'm getting the fire department. Well, my brother wouldn't sit still if he tried.
That's
He
true.
climbs out.
Oh.
So he's now up on the ledge, watching the fire truck come down the road, park, all the guys get all their gear. The young man that's in the hole is saying, get down here, don't let him see you. So he has to slide back down the hole to get rescued.
So both of them could have gotten out. That was very dramatic.
Well, my brother could. I don't know if the other one could. Yes, Steve could probably.
So you were, I was reading a little bit about your stories about growing up and what it was like, and what was the household like? Like, what was like daily life?
Most everybody back then lived in one of the homes from the 1800s.
Mhm.
It wasn't until we were in high school when they built the subdivisions higher up on the
Where the
hill.
grammars go, yeah.
Yeah, so most everybody just lived in these old homes. We thought nothing of it. Didn't occur to us that
It was all,
everybody lived like that.
it was all wood warmed. And
Yeah, and the foundations were what, piles of stones.
sometimes they were piles of stones. Yeah.
Sometimes there were piles of stones, yeah. Ours had been partially remodeled and partially not. When we first moved in, we had bats in the walls, and we could hear them in there at night. And most of it was just wood put together like that, and then it's all held together with wallpaper. And I think that's the only thing that held up.
Well, when we were tearing down one of the houses, there was all newspaper inside as insulation and to keep the, the wind out, basically.
To feed all the bugs that
Yeah.
wanted to live in there.
Yeah.
Um,
But I remember reading the newspapers because it was really interesting.
really old stuff. We had a wood burning stove in the front room and 12-foot ceilings. And every once in a while, a bird would come down the pipe in the summer, and you'd have to go get that out.
And there was always bats in the house during the summertime.
Always.
In the house.
Oh,
flying.
yeah. They
Oh,
were.
yeah. You just thought nothing of it. You just
Nothing.
open the door and let them out.
It's because nothing was sealed. It was all, everything was just kind of,
I don't ever remember being cold.
oh, I do. First roast my rear end on.
But maybe ours was better than yours.
It was probably a lot better.
Well, you had the newspaper.
Yeah.
You had the wall.
I had wallpaper.
The lining there.
We our kitchen counters was red floor linoleum, left over from some project. The back porch was what was interesting. A typical day was we would wake up in the morning. Mom in the winter would start the wood stove part of the gas stove, which I've often wondered, how do you have flame to the gas? But then she'd open up the oven door and we'd sit there and get warm. We had a little bowl that had a little tiny turtle in it that sat right there forever. Wraparound porch, and Dad put up the swings, and he was brilliant. He knew his children. He put the swings up just to the point where if we swung them together, we couldn't touch.
You couldn't kick each other? Well, that's no fun.
I know. So we worked hard. We worked hard.
Well, as you grew, your legs got longer. So did he figure on that?
Somewhere around 8, the landlord that owned the place, they put us in the little apartment downstairs that they had remodeled, and we lived down there while they refinished the whole upstairs. So we went from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom with a modern house.
And see, you lived a normal life. I lived a farm life. Grandma Marge had, when I was 4, she had, I swear there was 10,000 turkeys. I know there wasn't that many, but I swear the whole stuff.
Everything was
Yeah.
covered in
And
turkeys.
they had pictures of me. I was little, when you talk to turkeys, they talk back. Do you know that? Well, I got up on a big rock in order to get away from the turkeys because they were as tall as me, and I started screaming for help. Well, I would scream, and they'd go, and that would make me cry more, and I'd cry, and they'd go. I don't like turkeys to this day.
Well, they are.
Oh, they're vicious. They're mean.
Didn't you process turkeys at one point?
Oh yeah. When they were little, she had a couple of big, I don't know what you call them, small slabs with a roof on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the babies you'd have to go in there and make sure they didn't peck each other. Well, when they first came, they had sharp beaks, and you cut the top beak off so they can't hurt each other. They only have the bottom beak, but they can still eat. And it was George and my job to catch the baby birds and bring them to Grandma. And Grandma had this machine that I don't know how it worked, but anyway, she would put the thing in this machine and put her foot down, and it would cut the top beak off. And it was a smell of burning hair. I mean, oh, it stunk. Oh my God, it stunk. Anyway, that was
Just for the beaks.
just for the top of the beak, so they wouldn't hurt each other. And then we'd put them back out with the rest of them, you know. But when it came time for Thanksgiving, she would have us go catch a full-grown bird and bring them to her. And she had this big drum that had rubber fingers on the drum, and she would hold the turkey. Do you know what I'm talking about? The drum, and she'd hold the turkey, and the little fingers would pull all.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You missed that part.
I forgot. She'd hang them. She'd hang the turkeys on the clothesline and cut their throat, and they would flop all over, and blood was everywhere. Oh my God, it was a mess. And then we'd take the dead ones to her, and she would hang them on this thing, and that would knock all the feathers off, and then she'd pull the skin
The
feathers
big ones,
off.
yeah.
Well, kids
What a
today,
mess.
they have no idea.
Oh, darn, they
They're
missed
so
that.
they miss that fun stuff. I mean, the reality of processing.
Yeah, it was in. She had all this set up right next to her washing machine. Her washing machine was an old brown, you know, with the top where the
Ringer
washer, you know. Well, she had somehow along the line taken the plug off of it for something else, because she was always doing something new. So we had two bare wires, right?
Whose job?
If you didn't pay attention to stand on the block of wood that was sitting there, because it was all wet, because the washer drained right onto the ground, you know. If you didn't stand on the block of wood and put those two wires in, you knew it immediately.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that was fun.
The ringer washer. I remember my mom had a ringer washer,
Oh,
and the water went right into the yard and watered the yard.
Yeah. Gray water.
Yeah, once her arm got caught, she went all the way up to her elbow, and I remember a little bit of screaming going on. My dad came out and he had to, do
Oh,
it.
we didn't have a pop-off release?
Uh-uh.
No, we just had a pop off. We were
Yeah, we
pretty
had
safe.
pop-offs.
No,
Ours is better than yours.
her arm was stuck in there. My dad had to come and unjam it, and yeah.
When I got married, I was in the Philippines for 2 years, and my husband was in the Air Force, and we lived off base, so we didn't have the luxury of the fancy washers and dryers. We got the ringer washers. So I got to relive my childhood with this ringer washer. It filled with a hose. And the worst part was once the hose and the water reached that didn't make the rippling sound anymore, I'd forget it. Pretty soon I'd come out of the back room.
It was overflowing.
And I was like, slosh, slosh, slosh. So then I would take my broom and I'd whoosh it all out the laundry room door. But when I opened up the door, I would be met with lizards, alligator lizards, but this big.
In the Philippines.
Yes, and they would just jump all over you. And you went, "Whoa." I did that more than once. It shows how bright I am.
But you know how to take care of things, yeah. That's how to do, yeah.
So how did your family decide to settle in Angel's Camp? I mean, was it?
Dad had ulcers, so he couldn't go into the war. So he worked at Boeing in Seattle. Did you know, this is really amazing, I was looking up all the information about Boeing. To prevent the bad people from coming and bombing the plant, they built an entire city on top of the roof. You have to look this up.
Well, I've seen that, yeah.
It is totally amazing. And then they would
It's
hire
camouflage, yeah.
People from above. I remember seeing.
They would hire people to sit, they spend their hours and wander the streets and stuff, but it was all miniature because they would be flying over looking down, so the perspective was correct. But you could see the pictures of all these houses and things. So Dad did that. Then they moved to Santa Cruz because that's where my mom and my grandmother had been living before they went to Seattle, because Mom met Daddy in Seattle. So he needed a job and started working in a cabinet shop. And things weren't ripping really well. And Mom's family had a friend in San Francisco who worked for one of the big newspapers and found out they were setting up the Calaveras cement plant in San Andres. So he said, this chance, everybody's looking for work. So he said, chance that you could do that. So Dad came up here the year I was born, and then Mom and I followed about 10 months later. So I arrived in 49.
So that was when the cement plant
Yeah.
It was going full blast then, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So Dad was a part of all those years up until the plant
Mhm,
shut down.
mhm. Which kind of, it put a lot of people out of work, and
Yeah, it did.
it put a dent in the.
It was really the only, other than logging, there wasn't really any other industry. You had,
And the logging was starting to go downhill by then too.
yeah, you had asbestos plant down in copper and those things, but it was all winding down to where, yeah, the economy and,
You know, I was looking at how many different kinds of mines there were here. We had copper mines, silver mines, we have the cement plant,
Quartz.
we have tungsten mines up the mountains. We had a tin mine in Murphy's. We had what's the talc mine in Valencia,
Oh, yeah.
you know. And so, I mean, it's really
Marble.
amazing in terms of,
And the marble processing that they had going up there in Columbia too, right?
yeah, well, I was thinking Calaveras County, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's close enough. They're right there on the
Yeah.
river.
But I mean, it's really amazing how much stuff came out of our little tiny, county. And so, yeah.
It's even more amazing that growing up, nobody talked about it. You know, we had, by then, in, well, the 50s, some of the mines were still going. They were doing the hard rock mining after they did the placer mining. But really, just not very many people. During the war, they had ripped all the equipment out
Right.
and sold off all the parts of the metal and everything for the war.
Mhm.
So there was really nothing even left other than just, some archives and
Yeah.
things.
The cement pieces that couldn't be used.
Yeah, I know growing up as those kids, we didn't know what that stuff was. There was no,
Since the fire in Angels Camp that last couple of years ago, I had never seen the actual basis of it. And now it's all clear and you can really see it. Of course, they cleaned it up for
cleaned it up, yeah.
But I think it's really interesting. I've slowed down real slow and look, I'm probably dangerous on the road when I'm going this.
Speaking of fires, do you remember during the 50s, we had a volunteer fire department and they burned everything.
Every lot,
all the
every
lots.
empty lot, they
Everything.
cleaned them up.
Yeah, so they spent the entire summer, not if there wasn't a fire, they did control burns. At the end of it, somewhere around August, September, I don't really remember the date, but they'd have a big party down at the park.
Mhm.
But the coolest part was that trucks would drive all through Angels Camp and pick up every child at their house.
We all
Really?
had to ride.
Put them on a fire truck,
Oh my God.
Got to ride the fire
Such
truck.
fun.
and you get to drive,
It was called Fireman's Fun Day, and it went up until about 7-8 years ago.
yeah.
Mm.
I don't know, were they still picking up kids though?
No,
No.
no, that was
Can you imagine insurance?
insurance. Yeah, insurance runs the
Oh,
country.
yeah.
Babies could sit up front. Moms would hand them their babies.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
they had where the big hoses were on the side, they were rough. Well, if your fanny was small enough, you could fit in there. So you'd start off in that position, but then as you got bigger, of course, look, this year I don't fit in the trough anymore. So then you'd have to crawl back on something.
It's amazing.
And the big kids got to stand on the back and hold on with the firemen. I mean, can you imagine nowadays anybody letting anybody do that?
Oh, no, it's, we can't.
So we used to do that with the the ice cream truck.
Used to ride the ice cream
Back,
truck.
yeah, climb on everybody, a bunch of us.
Yeah, I'm sorry that the Fireman's Fun Day kind of stopped because when they started hiring firemen, they didn't want to volunteer their time and it wasn't a fundraiser anymore.
Mm.
And it really has been too bad because that was a place you got to meet people that you had forgotten about, never saw, just, oh, I forgot so-and-so and I went over to talk to them and, that kind
A
of thing.
big town reunion.
Yeah, it was. It
What
really
amazed
was.
me was the fire guys were all our dads,
Yeah.
but they knew all of us kids. They knew us by name.
Mhm.
I mean, you couldn't get away with anything in town because everybody knew who you
Right.
were. You were being bad.
Me and George got in trouble a lot because people talk.
Yeah.
You don't know, George was my cousin the same age as me,
Oh.
and he taught me my first dirty word.
Oh,
He,
dear.
he was one of those guys that all the way through, even the Vietnam War, he was always the talk of the town,
Mhm.
and he actually died because he shot his girlfriend in the face. He was doing crank, and she lived, but he thought that he killed her, so he went down to the park and he tried to get the policeman to shoot him. He was trying to commit suicide,
Mhm.
and they shot him in the leg instead, and he spent the rest of his life in jail. But yeah, he had so much energy and so much life, and it's sad that he had to end up that way.
Yeah.
The drugs really did him in.
Yeah. We, I'm sure there were drugs up here. It's funny, but we were so isolated, even in the 60s. I never knew what a POW bracelet was. We didn't have them up here. You know, just a couple of guys went into the service by 66. I went to JC in Modesto. We still had to kneel on the floor to make sure that our skirts touched the ground. And here's Berkeley rioting and all the horrible things happening in the war. It could have been 4 billion years away from us. We had no concept.
I do remember the bracelets. In high school, I had a campaign that we started.
Oh, we couldn't wear pants to school. You know, we had to wear skirts.
Fair day.
And
We had no pants to wear, so it didn't matter.
And I wanted to be an architect, and they wouldn't let me go into architect class because that was a boys' class. You couldn't take it if you're a girl, you know.
You guys went to Brett.
Yeah,
I got to
school
do
life.
Miss Allen. I got to do it.
they must have changed it when I left, because I left the last 2 years,
What year did you graduate?
68,
See, I graduated in 66, so they stopped it.
evidently, because they wouldn't let me in. Or maybe they just didn't think I was good enough. I don't know. Who knows? But I
Maybe you didn't roll your skirt back up after they measured it.
I did for Mr. Vince those days. We had an art teacher that if you wore a short skirt, you'd get a good grade.
And the boys couldn't wear. Remember the Pendletons were in style, and they couldn't. They had to try to tuck them in, but they were too thick. Remember that?
Well, you're too young.
Yeah, Pendleton guys would get sent home.
Mr. Vincent, did you know that he and his wife, we got to go out there because we were on the annual staff. He had a big party for us at the end of the year after the annual had been sent in yearbook.
He was the art teacher.
The art teacher. Gnarly old looking with his beard and everything else. His lovely little wife, which was something out of Mary Poppins. I don't know. She was just adorable. He had built his own house way out in Mountain Ranch or someplace in the boonies. It had huge southern columns, white columns. It looked like a mansion from straight out of the south.
Bo Vincent.
Yeah,
I knew him.
you
He was
knew
in-
him?
He was in our writers group. I knew him.
Amazing man.
Amazing man, and he married a much younger woman in her 30s when he was in his 70s. Had a couple of daughters.
Get out
He
of
went
here.
to his
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
All I
They raised, I forget what kind of, not Mustangs, but some kind of a,
All I know is that I couldn't draw a straight line, and he gave me an A because I wore short skirts, sat in front.
well, you know, his wife was a concert pianist, trained out of Juilliard, Genevieve.
She was putting all the children's nursery rhymes to music.
Oh,
She
how
taught-
cool.
She was writing all the
lessons.
scores.
Yeah, she taught lessons.
There was a big problem in my family because supposedly Robin posed for him nude. And
Robin who?
my cousin Robin, George's older daughter.
Marjorie?
Yeah, George's older sister, and she was never nude.
You've
It
been
was
talking
just-
about George Bartley all this time?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
Now the gossip.
George was a bully.
he was.
He was a little bully, and he was after my brother. And he was constantly just.
And in high school, they were good friends.
Oh yeah, so I went to grammar school. We got to for some reason, George was following Stephen home, or they arrived right at the footbridge. And I guess Mom finally got tired of it and said, we'll just punch him. And they got into the biggest row right there, and they got up and shook hands when it was all over. And I
That's how
think
it
they were
used-
fine from then on.
Yeah, in high school, they ran around together. And had-
Yeah.
Getting back to Bo Vincent, I was in his studio. Of course, the smell of linseed oil.
Oh yeah.
These great paintings. He studied with
really good painter.
Diego Rivera, the muralist.
Whoa.
He studied with him down in Mexico, and he lived with the Hopi for a while. He was one of the few that was able to paint them and the images of them, because I remember seeing those paintings up on the wall, the Hopi, and I thought, wow, so powerful. but I don't know if he could sell them. So I don't think he was not allowed to sell.
Yeah.
I wonder how he got stuck in a little tiny Angels camp.
He was
Bird
so
had-
wasted. I mean,
His father.
He
talent
was. He was, yeah.
Well,
It's true. Yeah.
I remember he'd come to a writer's meeting with it was storming and raining, and he'd have rain dripping off his cowboy hat, and he'd have, his beard so full of food for dinner. And he forded the creek. They lived off of Swiss Ranch Road. And he forded the creek with his Cadillac, his old Cadillac. He would get to our writers' meetings. We'd meet at the Metropolitan in San Andreas upstairs. And he said he came for the cookies. That was, because I'd always bring cookies. And he said, yeah, that's why he came. But handwritten novels. He had several of them, all handwritten. He'd read aloud.
What happened to him?
Well, this is my journey. I want to locate his wife. She eventually moved after he passed down to Turlock, and so I'm going to try to, connect back with them.
You better hurry.
See whether they were ever typed up. These were like many, many novels that he wrote, all by hand.
We didn't appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's like when I discovered how amazing he was, we were seniors getting ready to leave.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the rest,
Well, his mural is in the Metropolitan. They covered it up now for theatrical images that they need to do, but that mural is there, and I think Mountain Ranch Post Office has one of his paintings. They're beautiful, and
Yeah, they are.
I don't know what happened to his art or anything.
when did he pass away?
Oh, gosh. Well, that's shaking my memory a little bit. Maybe in the 90s.
Because in 1966, I thought he was already 100 years old.
Me too.
Remember?
Yeah,
Went to his home, and that was a museum in and of itself.
Oh, yes.
He had a dumbwaiter in the bedroom to bring up the wood for the fireplace. And I remember
Did he have like log fireplaces?
oh yeah, for just the bedroom.
He built them all. I mean, he did
Yeah.
everything himself.
Yeah, and it's just amazing. The pillars, like a southern mansion, and just a beautiful place. And he had his 1,300 family dining set in there, and all the relatives, all the paintings of his ancestors, all around the dining room.
It was just for you to do.
Just an amazing thing. And he had a collector. He had was it? Oh gosh. Anyway, I forget which writer it was, but he had first editions of when he was in high school. Jack London.
Jack London.
He had his high school because he was editor of the high school paper, and he had first editions of all. He had the whole collection of all of those,
This is what drives me crazy.
all of his work.
You get the people that are in the news, who get to be in the news and haven't really done anything to be in the news. And then you have people like this that literally should have been carried around.
Very
on
talented because he
And
built that.
never recognized. Never recognized.
Yeah,
for
never
their value.
recognized. Didn't even really get to share with enough people.
He was a kind of a guy, sent off for a kit, and he built his wife a harpsichord. And I saw it, and I played on it. Oh my
Played on
goodness.
it, yeah. Amazing man.
Yeah, so yeah, we've had some characters in our lives. And
We have.
we could probably talk forever, about your childhood and growing up here. I mean, it's a unique lives that we've had. I grew up in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, and we had chickens and things like that in the city. My parents, immigrants, and ran a boarding house. So I have some stories there, but always looking for a place to call home because we were always like looking for the perfect place. Calaveras is where we ended up settling,
And
45
when I
years
was
ago.
17, I couldn't wait to get out of the South.
Mm.
And I couldn't wait. Oh my God. Everybody was just so old and so.
You came back?
I came back when I had kids. I didn't want to
Why?
And
Why
you're
did you
living in your
come
back. You're living in your grandmother's home.
live in my
It's
grandmother's
a
house.
historic home. It's so nice.
Yeah, but we all have different hang-ups from when they're growing up, and we, I don't know, it seemed like we were rural.
I never knew we were rural until, because the city was just the city where you went. This was the real world. This was everything. And when I came back, people would run into people and they're going, oh, you came back? Why? I said, I've been around the world, and I said, I know where the best places are.
But you think about what we have here. People come to visit this place because it's so beautiful.
Yeah, and
We live here.
We get the
And,
advantage of all of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I resent so many people coming. To be honest with you, you know, I mean, when I was young, we lived in the mountains and we didn't see anybody on the roads. I remember when I was a teenager, we'd stop on the way from Copperopolis to Angels Camp, and if there was good music on the road, we'd stop and dance in the road.
Yeah.
Because there was nobody coming, so we didn't have to worry about it.
That was the best road racing road in the
It
entire
was.
county too.
And I'm mad that they're changing it.
We'd leave here on Sunday nights to head back down to Modesto. John had a 55 Chevy, and I had a Plymouth Valiant with push buttons. And run, 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 run. I might have had the old Rambler to start with. And then we start, and then we'd leave town, and we would road race all the way.
Can't do that anymore.
We straightened it all out, take all the fun out of it.
And there's so many cars coming, you can't possibly even stop. But,
Yeah, there was nobody. I mean, you wouldn't see anybody the whole trip.
I remember we'd come to see the movie theater here in San Andreas, and going home to Angels Camp, you didn't pass a car, you didn't have a car pass you. It was, you know, and at 9 o'clock at night.
It's kind of like that still at 9 o'clock at night. San Andreas, Murphy's kind of dead. I like that.
We went
I like that.
down to the stand before Spicer's. The Stanislaus was equivalent to the Bahamas. There was nothing better. The water in the summer was just warm and wonderful, crisp. So we went down there. We stayed for 3 days. So you camp in. There's an entire Boy Scout troop marched in, parked right next to us. Was like, you're gotta be kidding. There's nobody in the world, and then there's 50 Boy Scouts. Wow.
Well, it's a beautiful place to live. You know, we on my list, I've got so many questions of, you know, raising our children.
So this is volume 1.
This is volume 1.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so many memories. You
Barely,
guys lived through.
barely even took the top off.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
but it's been nice having you. I'm
Thank you
so
for
glad
inviting us.
I'm so glad you could come and yeah, let's do this again.
And again, and again.
Until they get tired of it.
Until they send us home.